Well, good afternoon. We are here in the diaspora, um, but we love our dear country, Ghana. So every Saturday we come to you uh, to talk about some of the pertinent issues happening in our dear country. Today, we are going to talk about the economy, and we are extremely fortunate to have none other than a former Minister of State for Economic Planning of the Republic of Ghana to have this conversation with us. The title of the show today is Ghana at the Brink. How can we resuscitate the economy? So help me welcome the 17th Minister for Finance and Economic Planning of the Republic of Ghana, Mr. Seth Emmanuel Tepe. We call him affectionately Uncle Seth. We are extremely honored and lucky to have you here today. So you're welcome.
Thank you very much, and good afternoon to your hosts and to your colleagues in the studio.
All right.
It's a privilege to be with you. I do a few diaspora shows, but this is the first one, which I'm doing with you, and I hope that your audience, enjoy the show.
All right, thank you. So, I think the last time we met was at MIT. You were
Yes.
invited, yeah, as a guest speaker by the African students in the business school. You spoke broadly about the economies across Africa, and so having managed one yourself, I guess there's no one more qualified to talk about any developing economies than you. But today, I want our conversation to be more personable, simplified in a way that the non-economist can understand us. I'm not an economist myself, but also not to take away the nuance that are inherent in conversations like this. So before I proceed, most of us know you formally as a former Minister of Finance, a Deputy Minister of Finance prior, but beyond that, we don't really know your background. So maybe for the benefit of our viewers, if you could give us your background prior to becoming minister, it will set us off for the conversation.
Thank you very much. I believe a few people have seen my bio and on the website, and it shows that I was born and brought up in Somalia in the eastern region of our country. Somalia is one of the district capitals for the Yilo Krobo districts, and that means I'm a Krobo, I'm Gadangwe in a broader context. I went to school in the Presby schools, a cluster of Presby schools there, proceeded, second cycle to whole technical, where I did my now whole technical university. I'm fortunate to be one of the few who went to a school that started as a technical institute, a polytechnic, and now a university. So that's unique. From there, I proceeded to Accra Polytechnic and then went to the University of Cape Coast, where I read the Bachelor of Commerce, and that began my accounting career. So mixed with some economics, but I'm not also a full economist. I'm a finance person. So that is the brief academic background. I proceeded to do my national service as the procurement agency, Ghana National Procurement Agency. Those of us who are, old enough would understand the procurement agency. I'm trying to get my cap.
Okay.
Yes. Let me just leave it on. So I proceeded to do my national service at the Ghana National Procurement Agency, and then after national service went to the Ministry of Finance, where I worked mainly on revenue, but as an accountant got interested in public financial management generally. At one point, coordinator for the VAT projects when it was introduced. Some of us know the VAT projects by Kumi Preku, the demonstration.
Yeah.
Where it failed, and then we reintroduced it. And after that, I joined the IMF, International Monetary Fund, where I worked for a decade.
Okay.
returned, to Ghana. In the interim, I did my master's at the Kennedy School, Harvard University. Of course, not MIT, but Harvard.
Yeah.
So I have been teaching since then,
Okay.
because TICVAS is about teaching and not
Yeah.
possible in the classroom, and I still teach. I teach
Okay.
at the University of Ghana Business School, and I was doing adjunct when we met on the
Yes. Yes.
at
Yes.
Brink College, where I met other good friends like Alex, your mutual friend.
Yeah. Yes. Yes.
Suppose that gives a
Yeah.
summary.
Yeah. That gives us a good background. So now, look, there's no disputing the fact that Ghana is in serious economic distress, right? The figures bear to that fact, and people's experiences also add to that evidence. Uh, our debt peaked in 2022 to about 92% of GDP. Most of the time, we hear these numbers, but as ordinary people, we cannot relate to them. Subsequently, we weren't able to pay our debts. It's simplified. Uh, we stopped paying our external debt. The last time that happened was in 1972 under a champon. So I want you to just take us through how we got there, what are the real life implications of something like that, and perhaps how to get out of that situation moving forward.
The first point to make immediately is what I was making at IMT at the time that we met.
Yes.
And I was making the strong point that Africans should, by themselves, reject the generalization of the continent as if it was one country. Because Africa is actually split, and I showed the map. I don't have the opportunity to show it today, but many people have seen me show it. And Africa is actually divided into high-income countries. We have only one or two. It falls from 1 to 2, Seychelles and Mauritius. The only high-income countries. Then we have what we call the upper middle-income countries. And let me emphasize the middle-income countries. There are two, upper middle-income country and lower middle-income country. And contrary to what people believe, that Africa is made up of only poor, countries, by the classification of this World Bank, if you put the high-income countries and the lower-income countries, of which Ghana is one, then Africa is actually split between middle-income countries and low-income countries. It's true. If you add even the North, then the ratio is very, very close. North Africa, we are also. Now, what's the importance of this? The importance of this is that Ghana became a middle-income country officially. Okay, unofficially first in 2010. Others even push it back to 2006. 2006. If you look at the indices, and that means that our per capita income, if you take our total output as a nation, which is measured in one way or the other, total income of everybody, let's put it that way, or the value of all production, cross, 1,200, 1,300 per citizen. That's what we call per capita. So they divide that by the population. So when you divide anything by the population, then that is per, individual. And once it crosses that barrier, then it means that you have become a middle income country. And what middle income becoming a middle income country means, is that there are certain things that you used to enjoy, particularly borrowing. And because I'm emphasizing borrowing because you spoke about our debt situation.
Yes.
You cannot borrow from institutions like the World Bank, and African Development Bank. Let's keep these two and some development partners, as if you are a low-income country. By becoming a middle-income country, we have moved from low-income country to lower middle-income country. And so the consequences are that you cannot borrow cheaply. And when I say borrow cheaply, relatively speaking, the best example is Akosomoda. We borrowed from the World Bank and from other, sources, including the, the US, private firm, we all know them, that's partnered. But the World Bank loan that we took was for 40 years. We did not pay interest. What we were paying was service fees. I hope you're getting the context.
Okay.
This is the cheapest of loans you can get to develop big projects like the Kosomo Dam, the harbor, and the other things that were built in the First Republic. I don't want to go all over them. When you become a middle income country, yes, you can still borrow at a relatively better terms, and that is 25 years with a moratorium of 5 years, not 10 years. So in other words, if you take the first loan, we borrowed at 40 years, 10 years moratorium before we started the repaying. For 10 years, you are not paying, anything. Okay. Now, when you become a middle income country, because you lose access to this, low cost borrowing, and then also you get a loss of grants or aid, we also lose much of that, right?
Okay.
So these two things put together, there are others, but let's just simplify it, means that you are now going to borrow and pay interest, even to the World Bank. Previously, you remember I said you were not even paying interest for 40 years.
Yeah.
Now,
Yeah.
25 years, you pay some interest, but it's still low. But the consequence also is that you start borrowing commercially on a larger quantity. And so your commercial borrowing, at which interest rates are, let's take a conservative from 6% to say 12%, where we have been, compared to say no payment, no repayment, your interest alone also balloons, right? So you have to change strategy, right? You have to change strategy. Now, let's compare this to a household. A very low income household, for many of us, our parents struggle. They take us through school. Sometimes you have to do menial jobs, help on the farm, markets everywhere, right? But maybe by you becoming relatively more successful, right? If you are very lucky, you uplift the whole family
Yeah.
from a very low income level where it's your parents' low income that's sustaining their family. And then if you have junior brothers, you take them on, you help them with education. If you are doing fairly well, you help with nieces and nephews. So it means that by virtue of you becoming, or our uncles, our nephews, and others becoming well off, it's not just education, maybe trading and others, they lift others in the family. But as with those individuals, even as you are going to school, if your parents borrow to supplement their income to take you to school, as I'm fond of saying, and many your listeners may have, some of them may have heard me, if they don't pay that money to an uncle or to a friend or to somebody who is more affluent in the society, they cannot go back, and you may not go back the following term, because they borrow term by term. And many of us go through this. In fact, for workers, they take salary advance, they take loans and other things to take their children to school. If you don't honor the repayments, you don't. I brought in this analogy to explain where we are.
Okay.
Simply put, we were not paying our debts, and they were borrowing more, not paying, borrowing more. The first experience was hippie.
Mm-hmm.
That's the essence of hippie, highly indebted, poor country. We were then a poor country. Emphasis,
Yeah.
highly indebted, poor country. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So our debt was forgiven. A
Yeah.
substantial amount of our debt, about 100% of it was forgiven.
Okay.
And we channeled some of this into the budget, which, made it look like we were, rich, or we had become affluent.
So what
Now,
you're saying is that after becoming a middle income country, we had to change our borrowing behavior, but we continued as if we were still.
precisely
Yeah.
because, and the thing to add is that even after the bitter experience of your debt being forgiven, which was not even something that many people liked, the fact that Ghana of all in Africa, was not paying his debt and the debt was forgiven, it was not palatable. It was, now if you compare what has happened, we continue with our borrowing even after that relief. And today we are unable to pay our debts. But let's see the difference. The difference is that the first time your debt was forgiven, the second time now, two big things are happening. our citizens suffered a haircut first. I think haircut has become well known,
Yes.
where people's pensions and the rest, had to be added to the package, which didn't happen when we became HIPIC,
Okay.
right? External, those from whom we were borrowing when we became middle income also had to suffer. Some of the governments also had to, but they suspended. They didn't forgive everything. They suspended part of our debt. And as we speak, since 2022, we have started repaying some of that debt. Okay. Now, the point I keep making is that if we continue with this habit, we may not be third time lucky. The third time, there are countries who are left to their own devices if they can manage, right? And we don't want to get there. So this is a backdrop of saying that Ghana has failed to pay its debt and had to be bailed out in a more severe manner with consequences for citizens who were investing in government bonds, who were putting their money, pensions and the rest, right? And we saw the demonstrations and the rest.
Yes, we saw the demonstrations.
Exactly.
The former
So,
chief of staff joined them in the demonstration. Yes.
exactly. So in as much as we are in this difficulty, we have to get our acts together so that the third time we are not left to our own devices. Otherwise, nobody will even look at us, right? Bring the economy back, learn to do a lot of reforms. We can talk about that, which we are used to, but incorporate
So,
it as a national agenda and get out of our situation.
all right. So let's just go into the reforms. What would you recommend should be done going forward? To
The first
essentially,
problem,
yes.
the first problem is that, and let me run through the problem, then I talk about the reform. And government is run, let's simplify it, in 3 categories. There's a government's budget, which it uses to pay employees, which it uses to meet its own expenses, which it uses to pay, to support, families, businesses, and the rest. But more importantly, which it uses to repay debt. And when you say debt, we mean interest and the amount itself that you have to pay. And that is what we call the budget. Okay. So we have to manage the budget well, which you can equate to a household that is daddy's salary plus mommy's trading income, and the rest, the profit on it, not the principal amount, which they use to run a household. If you don't run these 2 things well, right, whether it's a taxi driver, whether it's, a market woman, whether it's a businessman, whether it's, if you don't run it well, there's a budget every month from these incomes on which you have the expenditure. So that's the first part. The second part is what Bank of Ghana does. Bank of Ghana is the banker for government. And when government collects taxes and the rest, it gives the money to Bank of Ghana where it is kept. Banks and others also send some money to Bank of Ghana where it is kept. And when we export, we earn forex because we also import. It is also kept by Bank of Ghana that it is used to support the imports. If Bank of Ghana, or to be frank, because Bank of Ghana is a government's bank and supervises even government's accounts in other commercial banks, if the government does not run the budget efficiently, Bank of Ghana will be forced to go into the reserves for government. And if we are not careful, the reserves for banks and the reserves for other, because Bank of Ghana that leads in the issuing of bonds together with the stock exchange. That's borrowing. So if the budget is not run well, it will collapse Bank of Ghana, the central bank.
Yes.
And we know that. We know, we've heard things like printing of money, which is not supporting anything. We've heard things like our reserves going down so much that at a point it was not even enough to support 1 month's import, where ideally it should be 3.5 months to 4 months of import.
Okay, so did this government do something uniquely different in terms of its expenditure and basically running us into deficit that caused the problem? Because I guess you're attributing it to us getting into deficits.
Yes, absolutely. But the third, right, is everybody else. As a government central bank, everybody else in society, households who keep their money in the bank households, who puts the extra money because they want to take their children to school, they want to cater for their pension and the rest, who keep it in the bank or they keep it, by lending to government and hoping to get the money back. You remember I was talking about the haircut and all that. That's a Tesla, what we call the real sector of the economy. Businessmen who also put monies in these avenues and the rest. So you have households, business, and the third is the government itself. So when the government messes up, it messes up the individuals, like the haircuts and the rest. The government. So you see how the budget is very important. So now, to answer your question, the problems are one, if you are not raising enough revenue, you cannot meet your expenditure. It's just like a household. I want us to relate all this to a household because the three groups I've mentioned, they behave the same way. Government, households, and businesses, and they behave the same way. So just like a household, if it doesn't raise enough revenue but keeps borrowing or to meet even ordinary expenditure like uniform for the children, like food for the table and the rest, which for government is paying of workers and the rest, which will be paid from income, then the government will borrow, not like the household, not to buy furniture, not to buy a car, not for, but to lead a very expensive life, like always being in the supermarket, shops, shopping, and, for consumption, more or less. You are not saving. And so if government also runs into that, and that is a problem. Government has had that problem, not raising enough revenue, and some governments also borrow deliberately so that they can repay. The problem is that this government is the one that has defaulted since independence, right? HIPIC involves some default, but this one is total inability to pay the debt. And you mentioned that we couldn't pay our foreign debt. It's not just a foreign debt. We suffered haircuts, as citizens because we couldn't pay that domestic debt from our own citizens, which is like a lesson. Previously, the foreigners, bore your cross, but now they are saying part of citizens, businesses, and the rest must also bear part of that. So that is where we are now. And that is why, and I'm speaking facts.
Yes.
This government is the one that borrowed the most. It is the one that didn't repay the debt, the least repayment, and it's the government that therefore defaulted. And that is because they didn't raise enough revenue. They kept borrowing. 3, they didn't repay because the buffers that were left for debt repayment, which is coming from the experience of HIPIC, the budgets the buffers that were left, to stabilize the budget, which they used for COVID, for example, and could have done better if they had kept, increasing it with 3 oil fields instead of 1. It is also the government that got the most, revenue, the most aid, the most loans, but landed us in debt.
So where do you think all that money went to?
Well, part of that money, as I said, went into consumption.
Okay.
Most of that money, actually. And so let us look at some of the things we are familiar with. You remember the first big expenditure is free SHS.
Yeah.
And when you touch free SHS, yes, some people in governments come in and launch an attack, quite easily, right? That you don't want poor people to also get secondary education. That is to the point. We were borrowing. Remember, I said that there are certain expenditure which government should finance from its recurrent expenditure. It includes compensation, for teachers, for nurses, for doctors, for people in the offices, anybody who works for government, right? Including some of the agencies like universities and the rest who don't raise enough money, right?
Okay.
All of these things are to be met in principle from the money that GRA brings in. GRA, the money that, ministries, departments, and others collect, like, if you go and do inspection for a vehicle, you go and some papers are processed for you at Lands Commission and the rest, all those payments come in as non-tax revenue, right? So all this first category of expenditure is supposed to be met from these revenues. Because certain programs are so ambitious, right? And I cite the more recent one.
Yeah.
You are not able to meet them from this current expenditure.
Okay.
Revenue. So you
Yes.
have to borrow to complement it. And if that borrowing, is also there isn't enough money to pay down the debt, the interest, and then in actual fact, what you are doing is that you are creating two problems. You are not able, you are borrowing to meet certain expenditure which you should be paying from revenue, right? You are borrowing to meet those expenditure, but remember the interest, let alone the the capital element, the principal, what we call the main loan itself,
Yes.
not the interest, right? It's not being covered. Now, interest, which is part of what we call the expenditure that you must meet from GRA revenue, let's use GRA to symbolize for everybody that brings in revenue. It's also not being covered when you add it to wages. You remember we had that debate that we were using our tax revenue to pay only interest and wages. And that is something which you flag. It means that some government expenditures are not being met, like school feeding, wages and salaries in arrears and the rest, right? So if you continue borrowing and you don't set up a means for repayment, then it means that you are heading towards a place where you default. And that's exactly what happened.
Okay.
And we should have, reverse
Yeah.
course.
Yeah. So, for instance, the free SHS, there was a recent survey by Afrobarometer, and it ranked as one of the highest policies that most Ghanaians say should be kept if a new administration comes into power in the future. But the same survey also said that about 80% of Ghanaians think that this current government has performed abysmally. So, given the fact that you have just laid out that free SHS is a recurrent expenditure and it's one of the things that is ballooning our budgets or leading us into deficits, how would you reconcile these two events?
There is a capital element to it.
Okay.
Okay. There is a major, it's like a household buying a car, or a household buying furniture, a household building a house. We have to build schools, right? That is capital expenditure. You have to buy furniture. That is capital expenditure. So I'm talking about the consumption by students, the salary for teachers and workers and the rest. That is part of the first category of expenditure I was talking about. Now, yes, I don't come from a rich background. I always say that. So, and I attended school, with the Cocoa Board scholarship. So I'm not here to pontificate and say that other people should not be assisted to go to school.
Okay.
But you live in the diaspora. And I always ask the diaspora to help us explain this issue. You live in the diaspora.
Yeah.
For many of us in the diaspora, you have private schools and you have public schools. Now, will you bear with me?
Yes.
What you call basic school, primary school, middle school, or JSS as we know it, and secondary school, in many high developing countries, high income countries, it is free.
Yeah.
But there's no burden. Your child has to either walk to school, which is nearby, right?
Yeah.
We are talking about very rich countries, including United States, and the rest. Europe, right? So it's free. If we want to imitate it, that is what we are attacking.
Okay.
At all. And we cannot develop if we don't also educate our children like I was fortunate to be educated.
Yeah.
With my mother's income and whatever, and a scholarship, uncles and others supporting. So I don't want to be hypocritical at all about this issue. But we must face realism. We must be realistic that if advanced countries don't do it because they don't want to overborrow, but there is another alternative, there's another option to realize it, and that's where the compromise you are talking about comes in.
Okay.
That's where our policy comes in and say, yes, there are students who will need help. After all, you don't have your Achimotans or your, how do you call it, Infasipims and the rest spread all over the country. There are certain regions where you hardly get even a few schools that rise to that level. Maybe you can get here 2 schools. So those students who work hard in the interim while we are implementing the policy should be assisted, if they perform well, right?
So it
To also
means
go
it's
into
the
those
system.
schools. But the majority of schools, including even the compounds that, the Achimotans, the Infasipims and the rest, have, they have large compound.
Yeah.
Let's also introduce day schools as is done in the advanced countries.
Okay.
Let's train more teachers. Let's get logistics so that anybody going to a day school will not necessarily be deprived. So just as government policy is that if you want to go to primary school, you must go to primary day. Otherwise, if you want to go to middle school GSS, it is day, right?
Okay.
Why? Because it is impossible to put all these kids in what? Boarding school.
Okay.
The advanced countries and others also realize that it's impossible to put all of them, all of the secondary school children in boarding schools to feed them.
Yes.
We'll be depriving ourselves even the amount to build schools for them, to feed them and the rest.
Okay.
That is why, again, to be a bit partisan at this point, our policy is let us put up more SHS schools.
Okay.
Right? You see where the logic is coming from.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I definitely, yes.
Because if you want to bear the entire cost,
yes,
it's impossible for any
because you're feeding people's kids 3 times a day for
Precisely.
a significant part of the year.
Exactly.
Right.
And when we talk about the debt, we talk about the arrears that become debt. We all know that much of those arrears are owed to our mothers and others who cook for the kids.
Okay, who supply food. Yeah.
Yes, they were demonstrating.
Yes.
You can't say all of them are in opposition. After all, much of that work even goes to the, patrons of the government in power, right?
Okay.
So one is saying that let us strike, better still, let us learn from the advanced countries who have gone through what we are going through now, and early enough learn to say that let's cut, our quote according to our size, as we are saying. After all, we are a low-income country.
Okay.
And find a feasible way of introducing the free SHS without compromising quality. And so if you make savings by building more secondary schools, and you even feed in many of the advanced countries, there are poor kids.
Yes.
At least they serve 1 meal a day.
While they are in school, yes.
While they're in school. That can be free, 1 meal a day. So that the kid coming to school and not even eating at all, right? Self-serve too. Can get some cocoa or something to eat, have some snacks when they close, before they go home. And for many poor kids, that may be the best meal they will eat for the day.
Yeah.
Or even the only meals. So I'm saying there are examples.
Yes.
And that's why I mentioned the diaspora, because I live in the diaspora.
Yeah.
And my kids also went through. So I don't want to be hypocritical. And that is it.
Yeah.
In fact, we lived in 2-mile radius of the school.
Yes.
So the kids don't even take the school bus.
The school district system.
What is our equivalent of the school bus? Can we, give students coupons or something to take trotro and the rest? And then they drop the coupons, and then we support, that payment through GPRTU and the rest. In the absence of school, many of the schools have school buses. Both governments, give a lot of school buses. But the school bus, which is 1 or 2, may not be sufficient. So these are some of the feasible ways in which, we can, reduce, our expenditure.
Okay.
Right. And there are other examples, like not paying IPPs, so we don't have power. When in actual fact there was money, that should have been used, ESLA, a tax to pay the IPPs and the rest, which was collateralized. The loan was no use. One may not necessarily say that the loan was not used, not because it was wasted. Let me even grant that it was spent well. If it was spent well, not on IPPs to produce the power, in all probability, they went to other areas of expenditure like free SHS.
Okay. All right. So but what you
see, You achieve one goal at the expense
of
of
another.
others. And we are saying this is not sustainable. Nobody is saying free SHS as a policy is bad.
Okay.
Right.
All right. So yeah, you are arguing to reform it,
To
right?
reform it so that
Yeah.
we have money to fix our roads
Okay. All right.
as well, which is
Okay.
also
So
needed.
yeah. So I mean, you touched on the issue of revenue, and I want us to get into taxation, because there are certain taxes that have become characterized as nuisance taxes. E-levy is one of those taxes, right? This was
The first
passed.
one was Tesla
It was
to have that
Tesla.
term. Yeah, which
Okay.
I my government introduced. So yes. So
Yes.
that's how the term started.
Okay.
But we now know the use of Tesla.
Okay.
Okay, so what are the reforms? Let me take advantage. You ask about
Okay.
reforms.
All right.
The pillar or the pillars of taxation in Ghana and other developing countries are four. The pillars of the tax system are four. One is the income tax, which every employee pays. Every businessman must pay on profits. Employees pay on salary. Businessmen pay on, profit that they make. And even NGOs, if they do business and the rest, they have to pay on that element of it. The second one is the VAT. Okay, yes, this is a value added tax. The value added tax is a tax just like the income, is the opposite of tax on income. In addition to your income, after government has taken that income, that's a corporate income tax or the personal income tax, as we call it, depending on whether it's on salary or the money is not enough. So when you spend, government taxes you again. That's the essence of the value that. Just as with income, everybody's income must be taxed. It means that with the VAT, everybody's expenditure must be taxed. But just as we were saying, there are people with low income. There are people who are minimum wage and the rest, where that money is not even meeting, their household incomes and the rest.
Yeah.
So you see where exemptions,
Yeah.
lower interest, tax rates and the rest coming. So we cushion from non-payment of tax on a certain level of income to 5% to 10%, depending on your income level. And then those who are fortunate to earn more, right, they
Yeah.
pay, your 15, now 30, 35%. Okay. The same way when it comes to VAT, even though everybody should pay in principle, we say that, wait a minute, there are poor kids going to school, there are people who depend on only, their farm income, the farm is small. So we say basic food, unprocessed food, which you get from the farm, plantain, whatever, which is cooked raw and others should not attract, the tax. In any case, you will find it difficult to have the machinery to collect, all of them. We add basic education materials and basic health, medicine, and the rest. So no taxes are paid on that. Then there are two other taxes, which is the import duty and excise. The import duty, by its definition, means that it's on only imports, right? Goods which are imported, which will be consumed and attract VAT, but in addition, because they are imported, you pay import duty. Why do we
Okay.
pay the import duty? We also want to develop. We
Yeah.
don't want to be importing all the time. We should also export, one day. So once we develop our industries to be able to import, we impose the import. So let me give an example. If we start manufacturing mobile phones, which I am holding here, right, in Ghana, we
Yeah.
may decide that all imports, and it's creating jobs for us. We may decide that all imports of mobile phones will attract the VAT, but it will attract import duty. The one that is produced locally will attract, the VAT, but by definition, it won't attract import duty because it's not imported. And that's
Okay.
how we protect our local industries so that it can also grow, right? Then the last one is excise. We are saying that there's behavior which is injurious to society and to others. And the three main ones are petroleum, the environment, right? Petroleum, alcohol, right, and
Yes.
tobacco,
Okay.
right? So those on health grounds are called sin taxes, punitive taxes. Okay, so if you don't drink, you don't pay. But it used to be that, oh, even minerals was, but now we know that sugar is also injurious. So, if it's too sugary, depending on the content, you may have to pay, right? And that is, so those are the four. Why do I emphasize this four?
Yeah.
It is the essence of the structural adjustment program that we removed all the taxes that resembled these four, but which were just distorting the tax regime, encouraging evasion and avoidance. So about 18 taxes were actually eliminated when the VAT was introduced. Today we are reintroducing them.
Okay.
And as a result of which, the VAT is not performing well.
Okay.
So one, we need to rationalize the tax regime again, give them their due purpose, and as you mentioned, some of the nuisance taxes have to go away. It doesn't mean that all nuisance taxes are bad. There are nuisance taxes where when you are in trouble, like the stabilization fund, which we try to do to replace them, when you're in trouble, excuse me, and you are doing austerity, whether it's IMF induced or induced by yourself, you impose those taxes temporarily, but you take them off after the austerity program.
Okay. So
Right.
I remember, I
So these are
recall.
the four.
Okay.
So when we say we have to phase out, we are not removing them at once, but we have to phase out, right? These taxes, because they have become a nuisance. They have distorted the tax regime and they are not bringing revenue.
Okay.
If all the levies that we have, if you add them together, they are not up to 4% of total revenue.
Okay. So your
But the rest
argument
is
is that,
from this,
so your argument is that if we restructure the revenue system, we can get rid of these nuisance taxes like e-levy,
yes,
the bed
exactly.
tax, COVID
Because
tax.
because they become easy to administer.
Okay.
And then they become straightforward. Can you imagine at the port, paying 13 taxes, even more,
No, I mean,
in
I remember
comparison to,
the
yes.
former President Rawlings. There was a video of him with, I think it was a bill of lading of an imported car, and he named up to about 22 taxes on that imported
That's
car.
President Mahama.
Yep.
There's one which, there's another one
President Mahama.
actually, which Jerry also, was using. His Excellency Rawlings was also using to show the essence of the economic recovery program.
Yes, but I meant President Mahama. Yeah, it's fairly
President Mahama,
recent.
yes.
Yes.
And that is what we are saying. And remember, President Mahama was in a PNEC
Okay.
as a
So,
deputy minister,
okay.
as I was a public servant on the revenue side. Professor Mills,
Yeah.
you remember he also started many of the reforms, the creation of, he was IRS commissioner,
Yeah.
first chairman of the board commissioner, of IRS, and at a point vice president in terms of the economic management team, and went through all this. And that's why when he came the second time, we started the GRA reforms. But another important element before we move on, I know we may move on to other things, is, automation.
Okay.
Today, by automating, just as we have done with the customs, everything of yours, once you come through the entry, even if you evade, the bill of lading will show and everything, right? Can be downloaded into the domestic automated system. So when we did West Blue single window, as you call them, which today is ICOMS, all that data that is being held, the imports you are bringing in and everything, imagine if all of them were sent to your local tax office. Because mind you, the goods you brought on which you pay the import duty or the VAT or the excise duty is the one you are going to declare for income tax.
Okay.
So if GRA has that information, from the domestic tax division, get it from its sister division, the customs, immediately they have information on you, and when you file and you cheat, they know.
Okay.
They don't now have to come and lock your business units and the rest. And because you have also made it easier for businesses to comply, they will comply. And they know that they are being monitored. So one of the top priorities of the Mahama administration is to finish the automation that was stopped 8 years ago, even including the tender, right? Which is a domestic, we call it ITAS, and it's an IMF program. It's a program. So when people ask, are you going to continue the IMF program? The answer is yes, because many of the reforms, including GIFMIS to control expenditure, just like the tax, were stopped. I mean, elements of it or transactions are being taken around it. These are the reforms which would also help tax collection.
Okay. So, but it's often argued that compared to our peers, we have a low GDP to tax ratio, essentially saying that our tax regime is not spread out enough, it's not covering enough people or enough businesses. And that accounts for the shortfall in revenues as well. I don't know if it's something that you have thought about, and maybe perhaps.
Yeah, it's something which I know as as one of my areas is actually taxation. And as I said, I was a coordinator for the VAT, so I know it as a profession. There are certain principles in taxation. Let me just mention, three of them. I'm not talking about the one we all know, fairness and the rest.
Okay.
Equity, fairness or equity, generating revenue, and they all do. But for purposes of reform, 80% of your tax, right, is collected by only a few. But let's say 20. That's why you have the 80-20 rule. 80% of the tax is collected by 20% of taxpayers.
Okay.
And the remaining 20% is paid by 80% of your those who don't earn that much income, small businesses and the rest. So you have to create a balance, right? You have to create a balance. So when we say that we should expand the tax base, right? Yes, we should do it, but we should also have a focus on the large taxpayers, who are the ones who also with the capacity to evade or avoid the tax. That's where compliance comes in. And that's where automation of the activities and the rest, come in. So that's one of the major reforms that has to be. We have to finish the income tax, the integrated tax administration system for the domestic and link it, to all those things. Now, you ask a big question, why are these reforms, including the nuisance taxes, which has to go and all those, they make the tax system complex.
Okay.
They make it easy for people to evade and avoid. They make it easy to bribe our tax, officials and the rest, right? But it's a simple, straightforward tax. And again, let me go to the diaspora. Many of us in the diaspora, whether you are any high income, you are any low income, especially in the US, and I know in UK and others, when the filing season comes, you file. And sometimes the reason you file is because they've taken withholding from your salaries as we do here and everything.
Yeah.
Your part-time job and whatever, they take all that withholding. You only keep the receipts, you give it to your tax advisor, or if you are literate enough, you just, now it's electronic, you do the one pager, and then you get your refund. And many people that when they file, they will get a refund.
Yes.
So I'm saying that it's not just enough to bring them in, but to also make it easy for people to get their refunds. In Ghana, there is child education allowance, there's dependency allowance. If you are the one looking after your old man, your kids are young, they are not working and the rest, but you get these allowances only when you file. And you can offset it against, the tax that was, withheld, either at the port by your employer, others. When you bring in this motivation and you make that system efficient, you also help people, to file.
Okay.
And even low-income people can get a refund. And there's a motivation because after they've paid the tax already.
Yeah.
So why not file? So besides the general principles that we know, yes. And you asked a very important question. Our tax system is not buoyant, as we say. In other words, it's not as responsive as other countries because, as I said, one, all the levies are not bringing in sufficient revenue, to cater. But two, you can look at the statistics. The highest point, which I think was exceeded only in 2023, with even 3 oil fields, all the incomes that flowed to this administration and rest, the highest point was 2015. Tax to GDP ratio and revenue to GDP ratio. And it has just been exceeded. That tells you that the period of reforms from the Mills administration, merging IRS, and the VAT service, creating GRA, giving it autonomy, so that not even the minister can tell the Commissioner General how to do their work when it comes to operations. You can change the policy, you can change the law, but they have to give you what it takes to do all those things. Those are at the high level. But when it comes to operations, collection, and the rest, they're given autonomy. And that's
Okay.
one of the reasons why GRA was allowed to keep 6%. I understand the ratio has been of all taxes collected so that they can use it to enforce compliance and
Okay.
do the administrative things that we're talking about. So I
Okay.
think we can follow the example of advanced countries.
Mm-hmm.
Those of us in the US know that one of the things that President Biden did, of course, it's sometimes political and other things,
Yeah.
was to strengthen the US IRS. And
Mm-hmm.
today they are far better than they were 10 years
Yeah.
ago. That's an advanced country.
Mm-hmm.
And they were being strengthened. And what they were being strengthened would have been our envy even if we had that.
Yeah.
But today they are using AI, they are using all of those things too. And so we must emulate. And that's why automation comes in.
Okay.
Yeah.
So yeah. So if I'm hearing you well, you're saying that a major policy area of a future NDC government would be significant tax reforms.
Not just tax, because
Yes.
people say that I talk too
Okay.
much tax.
Anyway, yeah. Clarify that.
But
Yes.
we must also cut our expenditure. We spoke
Okay.
about, free SHS, we spoke about other expenditure. That's
Mhm.
why Mahama is saying that when he comes, he's going to have a national conference and a consensus,
Okay.
just as we did with Senche and we did with Takrady and all those fora that he held, to get views from experts, views from labor, views from the community, everybody, so that we have a way forward. So that was that. So we need to trim our expenditure as well, because the difference between borrowing and expenditure, and let's debate the things that are increasing the expenditure. Today, free SHS, we all know. I have about 3 or 4 nephews in school, and sometimes the fee you pay is even higher than when we didn't have free SHS, right? Because you didn't have to send them money for food, or you package food, in VIP and send it to them, those who are in big towns and the rest.
Yeah.
Now, then when we do that, then we must also tackle arrears, so that that I'm not talking only because our arrears, we don't even monitor them well. A contract is awarded, it's not finished, the budget is read, then the ministry takes it that I have new money, then they award more contracts.
Okay.
Instead of using that new money to finish the old contracts. That is the pipeline that President Mahama was saying.
Okay.
That there are so many unfinished roads, so many unfinished schools, so many unfinished hospitals, so many unfinished. You can go through big projects and small projects. So he's saying that it doesn't matter who started it. Of course, it will be scrutinized.
Yeah.
But the arrears must also be managed well. And what happens is that when you collect your revenue, and I'm going through there to show that what we want to do is comprehensive. When you collect your revenue, you deduct your expenditure. You see, that's why you must pay attention to both, because the difference is your budget deficit.
Okay.
And then you add arrears and it increases the budget deficit, right? And the two is what you finance. The two is what your income was not sufficient, and therefore, you must go and borrow. Then you have to look at, am I borrowing more than I am repaying? Yes, that was our problem. And that explains, the popular expression, the sinking fund.
Okay.
Which is in the Constitution. And we are saying we cannot be borrowing. Let me illustrate quickly. If you have a loan of 100 cedis to pay, right? And then you borrow 4, right? Or let's say you borrow 10, and you repaid only 5 of the old debts. Your net increase is what? 5. The 100 doesn't go down, it goes up by 5. If you reverse it, right, then it means that you have overpaid by 5, and therefore your 100 goes down to 95, right?
Okay.
So the rate at which we pay our debt is also very important. So I want to show that I'm not just preoccupied with tax and increasing taxes or whatever, no. But we must go through the whole, what we call the fiscal framework. Revenue, expenditure, arrears, debt, and then borrowing. Debt, borrowing, and then a new increase, which is a deficit. So we are going to look at this whole thing, and then we must have a strategy for going to the market. And that's using, you must also stabilize, one last reform before we move on the fiscal side.
Yeah.
If today cocoa prices are high, if today gold prices are high, as they are now, if all those things are high, it means that you are going to earn more money. But remember, you don't control the consumption of chocolate. You
Okay.
don't even control the highest reserves in gold bars, and the rest are held by the US and other economies, right? The use of gold and all for whatever purpose. So you don't control the consumption end. And so the prices may be up because there's a shortage. When there is, a decline, then you put some of the money, the time to prepare for crisis, just as we were doing with global financial crisis and then COVID. If we are continuing with COVID, it's not when the crisis is upon you.
Okay.
Right? You go and borrow. If your child is sick and you don't have savings, you go and borrow. You can't say you don't have money.
Yeah.
That's why a child is innocent. Right? That's why when you get a bonus or something, you have to put part aside, so that when times strike and they are tough, then you. So in other words, you see from what I'm saying that we should not be borrowing for consumption excessively. Some type of necessity, you have to do it. If we are doing well, we must put money aside and not continue to be borrowing for everything. So that is the fiscal reforms that we want to introduce.
And you guys had the sinking fund, I mean, for all that stuff.
Yes, we have to bring it back.
Yeah, okay.
And you may have heard President Mahama saying that the sinking fund, the source of income, because we don't generate budget surpluses, usually the oil revenue, which is not used for consumption, is a stabilization fund. You cap it, right? So he's saying that, okay, then anything new, any natural resource that comes in, which is also new, part of it should be used, to pay down arrears and to pay down our debt, so that we are able to borrow for development. A prime example, Terminal 3 is being paid for, not just from the sinking fund, but also from the airport tax, and the rest. That's what we call the self.
So it's important to build buffers in the event that there are external shocks. Yeah.
So, but just the same way a household builds buffers.
Yeah.
And when you have a salary increase and you save some, and the same way a business, when they make profits, they think about, the business becoming bigger and they put some money aside, or when things go bad, like doomsday comes and you have to buy a generator, and the rest, right? Which shouldn't happen, by the way. Yeah. So governments must also learn to follow these disciplines.
So I want us to move into exchange rate, but quickly, how about the Russia-Ukraine war COVID argument that has been put forward by this government as responsible for our current economic situation?
Let me quote the IMF. The IMF has settled the issue, and it says that it is in the documents, which the current document for the IMF program, it is telling, it says there that there were pre-existing conditions, and that we should blame everything on COVID, and that before COVID in 2000, we had challenges already, which some of us were saying have been saying for a very long time.
Okay, all right.
So we must just admit that we didn't, it wasn't COVID. In any event, as I've been saying, we got about $6 billion US, including the Bank of Ghana financing and the rest for COVID.
Okay.
It's the highest.
So we actually
it's about 6 times more than, the monies that we got periodically to do all our 16 IMF programs. Nobody got above 1 billion, including the last one before this one, where we are blessed with 3 billion, and it's not making an impact.
Okay. So during your regime, and let me show this is the exchange rate movement. Baumia made a very profound statement that when in doubt, consult the exchange rate, essentially talking about the performance of the economy. But we have we've witnessed an unprecedented depreciation of the cedi. Again, going back to the cause of the problem, and also what a future NDC administration would do to curtail this precipitous fall of the cedi. I mean, because we didn't even touch on inflation, because inflation is a big deal in Ghana right now. I mean, it rose to about 55% or so in December 2022. So combining that with the impact of the exchange rate, it has significant implication on people's material well-being. So briefly, what do you think is responsible for this? And also, what would a future NDC do to stop the blood from flowing, so to speak? Yeah.
Now, I see that you have a very beautiful, graph. You get the same feature. This exchange rate, right?
Yes.
If you have it, you can display in succession inflation, same behavior.
Okay.
Same behavior, right? From the, earlier ones, then it spiked, and then we are where we are. Debt, the same from 57%, then it spiked, like you said, to 90. If you have contingency funds, it actually exceeds, 100%, right? What about deficit? You can show the same thing from
Okay.
6.1% is up to 15% of the rest. I like data, I use data.
Yeah.
So yes. So you can continue showing. You can show the debt, you can show deficit, you can show the same thing. And that's
Okay.
what it is, that if this behavior, is characteristic of all our economic indices, you can show growth,
Mm-hmm.
and everything. Growth, it will be
Or
down.
dip. Yes.
Yes, it dips, yes. Right? Then it tells us there's something fundamentally wrong with the economy,
Okay.
given the rate of increases or decline. So they say a picture is worth 1,000 words. And that is why we should look at the pictures and accept, that's a fundamental problem, and have reforms,
Okay.
yes.
So
So short answer, we have to just implement reforms in all areas of the economy. It's not just tackling one, because they come together. Now,
okay.
on the exchange rate, you know, the exchange rate is the price for, at which you change the dollar into CD and CD into dollar, vice versa. That's why you have the buying rate, right, and the selling rate. If you are selling, if you are holding dollars, you go and change into CDs. There's
Yeah.
a rate. And if you are buying, you are going to buy dollars, that also has a rate. The difference is actually the profit which the business will do, because the forex bureaus and the rest are, Bank of Ghana, yes, is buying and selling rates, and normally. And what do you need dollars for? You need dollars for imports. Business need dollars for imports. Government needs dollars to pay for, let's say construction and other things, consumption, which it doesn't produce in a country, right? And how do you get the dollars? Through exports, cocoa, gold, and the rest. So we are saying that let us look at, apart from looking at the level of imports and looking at the level of exports, right? And removing policies like the benchmark, which the government removed anyway, going into the IMF program,
Mm-hmm.
which is level of exchange rate for converting goods. Remember, we spoke about the import duty, which is
Yes.
protecting local industries. And then you go and you favor the import, right, against your exports or your domestic production. It will lead to a decline. So, but our main new instrument, which was introduced before, is the Exim Bank. You see, we have traditional exports, cocoa, gold, and the rest they bring in. And cocoa is easy to do because you have cocoa board. Of course, now we know that
Yeah.
debt you are showing is part
Mm-hmm.
of it, right? It's been depleted, so revive it, because it's a
Okay.
very important, agency, right? Bank of Ghana, stop it from financing. Government should raise enough money. It shouldn't be covered, financing itself, and come back to the stabilization fund and don't use Bank of Ghana to finance the deficit,
Okay.
which again was stopped. Those are some of the what we call the structural measures. But what's the essence of the Exim Bank? Exim Bank would play the role like Cocoa Board is playing for the non-traditional exporters, right? There are businesses in Tema and other places which are exporting, but they're exporting on their own. What if they can go through one agency, right? If I'm exporting 2010 on my own, it's difficult for me to do any major transaction outside the country, just like the cocoa farmer. But if I pass it through the Exim Bank, and Exim Bank brings in 100 more, who are also doing 20, 30, and well, we are talking about 200 million, 300 million, right? So like the cocoa farmer, they can then use the forex, bring it together, and use it to support those who need forex to bring in, those who are generating the forex. They can be helped by collective, because then Exim Bank will be able to borrow, at a more competitive rate, bringing everybody together, 200 million, than if everybody is going, to, and then the Exim Bank, through that consolidation, will be able to even, if you are doing it annually and you prove yourself in your record, and that's very important, then Exim Bank can help you, giving your record, track record. They can, through guarantees and credits, you begin to earn import, you buy equipment, and then you are allowed, your supplier knows you, there's a standing order, for the payment to be deducted from your exports and the rest, and so, you get the opportunity to bring in that part. Instead of saving for 5 years, you bring in the part now to fix the factory. And then you repay through your exports, right? So those are some of the transformational issue reforms that we have the Ghana Infrastructure Investment Fund. We all are attracted. Today, Dubai is building even a bigger airport that would even be competing with Heathrow and the rest. It is through the Dubai Fund.
Okay.
And we are able to also, extend Terminal 3 after so many years through the self-financing and other mechanisms, sinking fund and the rest that we established. Who knows?
Okay.
We could be Africa's Dubai. They're going to build that big airport if we continue. And we don't stop policies just because we are not the ones that introduced them. I mean, that's for all governments.
Yeah. So how about the barter system that was introduced by Baumia, the gold for oil thing? Because I think that was what he said was going to stabilize the city in the time being. What do you think about that?
Why has it not stabilized the city? Before, why has it not stabilized the city? Has it?
Right. I don't think so.
But let me pose a general question.
Yeah.
I have a gold bar. Right? I sell for 2,000. Or government sells for 2,000. Right? On the open market.
Okay.
And we bring the 2,000 home and give it to Bank of Ghana.
Yeah.
Right? Now, Bank of Ghana being turned, regrettably, that's why IMF said they should stop being turned into a commodity, company to replace precious minerals and the rest. Right?
They're printing money, yes.
Okay. Now negotiates, takes the same bar, right? And negotiates with an individual and give the 2,000 to an individual.
Yeah.
At what price? Is the individual giving us premium? The only way you can justify is if that individual is giving us premium.
Okay.
Right.
Yeah.
Otherwise, the individual is, is taking a gold bar, and we are expecting the individual to give us the same 2,000.
Yeah, worth of oil.
Worth of oil.
Yeah.
Couldn't Bank of Ghana have used the 2,000, to import the oil? So, as I say, for me, this is a very basic, and I hope that if I can repeat, there is no technical. I'm saying that you are Bank of Ghana or you are precious minerals and others, the mining companies and the rest, they sell gold bar.
Yeah.
And we get, let me say, $2 million to make it realistic. Right. Now we take that, the same quantity of gold bar, we give it to an individual, right? And then he gives us, oil. Couldn't Bank of Ghana have also used the 2,000?
Absolutely.
Or is it because we don't have the space? So, and we are having doom so, we are creating some, a way of bringing in oil, because if we put the money and give it to Bank of Ghana, it will meet everybody's need.
Okay.
The doom is a headache. So instead of rationalizing it through Bank of Ghana, we are now, Now, my final question on this: when did barter? When did barter? Develop in a country? Where has currency come?
Yeah.
Was the whole world not on the gold standard? If we did a little bit of economics, the whole world was a gold standard.
Yeah.
The US of the gold standard and introduced reserves and whatever to make it, right? And regrettably, and I say this with regret, that haven't we even sold, or haven't Europeans and others bought human beings from us?
Yeah.
Is that no barter? And were they not, when they came, were they not exchanging the same gold? Right?
Yeah.
Why are we not more advanced than them if we have to go that far back? After all, we started giving them gold a long time ago. And then they entered our bauxite and diamond and other, their companies are still doing it. No, I believe that we should just be transparent, and compete and have transparent means which everybody will understand. Bank of Ghana publishes its balance sheet. We know the value and everything. Are we going to complement it with an individual's balance sheets? Under which laws?
Okay.
So I close my case on.
Okay. All right. So, but my final, not final question, but towards the final. And let's go a little bit into politics. The NDC is promising policies that many have described would involve a lot of expenditure. For instance, something like the 24-hour economy. The expectation is that it will bring jobs, but also there are going to be things like tax breaks. You may need to put up certain infrastructure. So given the current situation, as far as our debt is concerned, and the fact that we are not also raising enough revenue, how is this policy or these, giant capital intensive policies that are proposed by, the NDC campaign going to happen if indeed Ghana gives them the nod?
Let me give three perspectives.
Yes.
The first one, when it comes to capital expenditure, you know about the Green Book.
Yes.
And we now know that they were not photo
ops.
They were not downloaded from other countries, internet. Whatever. And now we know, don't we? Right? But remember, we did that all infrastructure. That's my second point. When we were in an IMF program, we did all that infrastructure when we were in an IMF program.
Okay.
It reached its peak 2015, 2016. And if crude oil prices had not, fallen, we could have accomplished many of those. Maybe one election would have been for the distortion. Right? Yes. So when we say we want to build infrastructure, we have learned through the mechanisms which we were discussing, stabilization fund, sinking fund, to create a balance, between building Terminal 3, pipelines, for the not to flare gas, the gas processing plant itself, free SHS, and name them, hospitals, and the rest. And yet still, our debt was 56%. I've heard it said that, the NPP says that they've done more infrastructure than us. Well, apart from doubting that in itself, we were measured. We created infrastructure, and I don't think even if they did this more than, without taking the country into debt. That's a qualitative difference.
Yeah.
You can create infrastructure and take the country into debt. Or you can have a strategy that balances, other issues, other risks that you face with borrowing, and still have a healthy 57% debt. Have, a deficit of 6.1. Forget it wasn't 8.3 or 10.3.
Yeah.
6.1. You can go to His Excellency Sona. I don't mean President Mahama. I mean the His Excellency, Nada. So the point I'm making is that we have some experience. Which worked.
Yeah.
And I don't think we're going to throw them away. And especially now that the public has seen some of them, we'll do more education on them. The distortions were there. You show the graph and all that. And by the way, if I may just go back a little bit to that exchange rate, right?
Yes.
Exchange rate factor. I remember it was low. It was low because earlier, around 2004, 2006.
Yeah. So the graph, the graph
because of the redenomination.
Yes. Okay.
It wasn't because of any effort. Ours was a matter of effort.
Yeah.
From the redenomination that made it, the value is the same.
101, yes.
We cut four zeros to achieve that. Right. Today, before they can achieve what we did, they have to cut more zeros.
Yeah.
Right. And so my answer is yes. And yeah, we do have, promises. We are not saying the implementation will be easy.
Mm-hmm.
Just as when we had those ambitious self-financing projects and the rest. Remember, we were doing doomsday, right? We were trying
Yeah.
to cure doomsday. We were trying
Yes.
to cure, how do you call it?
The load
Solar
shedding and
spine,
power. Yeah.
and many of those big, issues, right? So it's a question of balance, and we are not saying we are going to achieve all of those goals in 1 year,
Okay.
because initially we have to stabilize the economy
Yeah.
and begin to see how we can implement this. My
Yeah.
further point on that is, when we say 24-hour economy, right, it's about efficiency, but it will be based in sectors. Let me give you two examples,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yeah.
Nurses, doctors, and today even education, evening schools and whatever. Can we have a transportation system, that works to make this more efficient, to be more productive, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's sector based. And people say that, yeah, we are doing the 24-hour economy. Yes, but how efficiently it is. It's not just about doing something new and showing that this is new. No, we do new things and the rest. Many shops and others close because alleys and street lights and things are off. They can be extended as they were in the past and go beyond. If you can take the money, including the extra money that's for street lighting,
Mm-hmm.
and then wind the DSCF and the rest and improve,
Okay.
the lighting conditions in the country, so people can move freely, right? And get the police patrol to be doing, make police patrol safety even more efficient. Do 24 hours, great 24-hour economy. I have a checkpoint going to my house,
Mm-hmm.
Next in a given location where, almost every evening, I meet a policeman.
Okay.
Well, sometimes they close around 10, 11, because when I'm coming home around that time, could they extend it to the dawn, even if
Okay.
not around the clock? Could they run shifts and the rest? So I think we're thinking about practical ways of doing things. And after all, we have expanded, if we have expanded Temaport, which we did, to be bigger than ever what it was, why can't customs, clear the goods for the big trucks to use the road in the night instead of, creation of, more headaches, on the, I thought they like to travel in the night,
Yeah.
because there are all these, vehicles are just crisscrossing them and other things, yeah, they might, drive in, so I think there are many ways, many practical ways, apart from the new areas, construction can be done in the night. We live in advanced countries.
Yeah.
Those lights are generated sitting, on trailers, right, with powerful lamps and the rest. So I
Okay.
think it's feasible. We should be given a
All right.
chance. Give
All
the
right.
thing a chance. Yeah.
All right. Well.
Of course, the private sector is also there.
Okay. Well, I think we've had a very lively conversation, and I would bring it to a close now. And what Uncle said is saying that we should trust them on the record, right? Even I read Manasseh Azure's book, The Fourth John, which was mainly about your administration, and he attributes the NDC's loss to overemphasis on the Green Book. And I mean, it demonstrates evidence that the infrastructure was really done, but the campaign extolled those infrastructure to the detriment of itself, basically. But I mean, I'm just saying that to emphasize the fact that the record is there in terms of the infrastructure you guys put in place, and it didn't lead us into the economic distress that we currently find ourselves in. So, thank you very much for joining us this evening. We're really honored to have you, and I will hope to have you here again next time, probably in another capacity.
Yes, maybe to do a Q&A. I'm sure
Okay.
you
Yeah.
have
So,
listeners who may want, to have some questions and the rest.
okay.
I'm a
Exactly.
teacher.
Because,
I
yeah.
go back to Q&A all the time.
Okay. Yeah. So, I mean, we've laid the foundation here. You've become a friend of the show. So, yeah, next time we're going to bring you on purely to answer questions from the audience, basically. Yes.
Thank you very much.
All right. Thanks a lot, Uncle Seth.
All of them I promise can be answered. Some are too.
All right. All right.
They will definitely, as far as our policies and the rest is concerned.
Okay. Yeah. All right. Thank you very much.
And thanks for the good work.
All right. Thank you. Bye.
Thanks for the opportunity.
All right. Bye.
Bye.
Yeah.
You let a yum 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 yum. Naya pere mat naya pese. You let a yum 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 yum. Naya pere muna kapera. Chora kakisa. Oyari hele pere. Balungana baire. Tupa ani. Imping tuna. Santa tapage. Bayu tuvitele. Masankele yura. Baba tuviyara. Oyari hele pere. Bongana baire. Tupa ani. Asikuluja tuna. Ikina kine. Unkile sikuluja kine. Titatia. Undidle sikuluja tia.